So are we ready to go, Antonio?
Yes, when you want.
Okay, we'll start. So good afternoon or good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Eden-Oxford or Oxford-style debate. I'm just going to spend a little bit of time introducing the concept first of all, and then I'll introduce our speakers and the motion that we have for debate this afternoon. First of all, this is called an Oxford or an Oxford-style debate. I think my friend and colleague, Professor Teixeira, has done this in order to tease me, because he knows I have been associated all my life with the University of Cambridge. So, and there's significant rivalry between the two universities. Now, it is true that Oxford was founded before the University of Cambridge. It was founded in 1096. I think it is the second oldest university in Europe. And Cambridge was founded 13 years later in 1209. And the reason Cambridge was founded was because a number of scholars left Oxford because they thought there was too much drunkenness and fighting. And I have to say that has coloured attitudes in Cambridge towards Oxford for the succeeding 900 years. However, on the question of debate, the Debating Society in Cambridge was founded in 1815, while the Debating Society in Oxford was only founded in 1823. So these rules should actually more properly be called Cambridge or Cambridge-style debates. The Oxford Debating Society has produced such great political leaders as Boris Johnson and David Cameron. So you can see just how successful they've been in talking to each other in Oxford. Right, let me explain what happens. So in an Oxford-style debate, we have a proposition. And the proposition, I would tell you several times what it is so that you have a clear idea of what it is we're discussing. The proposition this afternoon is that the COVID pandemic will have no lasting impact on learning and teaching in universities and colleges. That is the proposition which is up for debate this afternoon. The COVID pandemic will have no lasting impact on learning and teaching in universities and colleges. And we're going to ask our two speakers to speak firstly for it and then against it. And while they're doing that, you are invited to put your comments and questions in the chat box, please, in the chat box. And I will pull some of those out and articulate them for our speakers. And after we've done that, we will then ask our speakers to come back and give a 3-minute summary, responding to some of their opponents' points and responding to some of the points that they've seen in the chat. And before the debate starts, you are asked to vote on the motion before you've heard any proposition or opposition. And then after the summaries, you're asked to vote again. So we'll see whether your vote changes before the debate or after the debate. And there we get an assessment, if you like, of the advocacy skills of our proposer and our opponent. So that is what this is about. So the person who is going to propose the debate, let me introduce you to her, is Dr. Christina Costa. And Christina Costa is an academic at the University of Durham, another one of the ancient universities in England, in the School of Education, where she researches and teaches on the sociology of education, with a particular focus on educational and digital inequality. She's got several notable publications to her name: Theory as Method on Bourdieu, Education and Society, and Bourdieu, Habitus and Social Research. She has a BA, British Academy Lieberhume Small Research Grant funded research project just about to begin about international students. And there's something she has disclosed, which we thought is not part of her official CV, but we thought might be of interest to you, that before she joined academia, Christina was an officer in the Portuguese Navy. So there you are, that tells you something about her strength of character. So Christina is going to propose the motion. Opposing the motion is Dr. Mar Perez San Agustin. And Mar is an associate professor at the Université Paul Sabatier III in Toulouse, France, and also an associate researcher at the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile. So she has wide international experience. She has worked also at the Universidad Carlos III de Madrid and as a teacher in the Department of Telematics Engineering. She has a doctorate in Information and Communication Technologies, where she obtained the cum laude grade with a European mention, so very significant doctoral achievement. She's worked in Stanford, in Chile, as I mentioned, and she is still an associate researcher in the Chilean University. Her research focuses on the study of self-regulation in MOOCs, MOOC-based hybrid methodologies, collaborative learning with mobile devices, and engineering education. And Ma has several awards to her name, which I think you'll probably be able to find in LinkedIn or somewhere like that. And Ma has also disclosed something personal rather than to do with her profession, which is that she sings and plays the guitar in her free time, and she's sung in choirs since she was 8 years old. So she is a musician all her life. So there's something for you about Ma also. So let me then move just to remind you of the motion and to ask you to vote. So the motion is that the COVID pandemic will have no lasting impact on learning and teaching in universities and colleges. So can I ask Antonio for you to put the voting sheet up now, and for colleagues who are participating to give your vote, what you think, whether that is a good proposition or a proposition that you would oppose now, and I will ask you to do it again at the end of this procedure. So can we have the first vote now?
Yes, first vote is there, and we have 21 who already voted, and someone more, please. The results are quite expressive.
Okay, so when you think we've given enough time for everybody to vote, please tell us the result.
Okay, 26 out of 29 have voted, so we'll just have a few more seconds and we'll stop.
Okay.
Antonio, I think Guy Griffiths doesn't have a button to press for his vote.
Well, he should have, because everyone else has voted. In the pool, maybe you can find it in the pools.
Okay, Antonio, let's go with the results we've got. What is the first result?
29 out of 30 participants, of course, outside the ones that actually are involved in the discussion, have voted. And I'm going now to, just a minute, please. Okay, now you can see it.
Okay, so we have 9 for the motion and 21 against. Wow. Well, let me move straight away to ask Dr. Cristina Costa to give her proposal for the motion. Cristina.
Okay. So first of all, I'd like to thank Eden and Antonio for inviting me to speak on such an important topic and such turbulent times, and also Alan for hosting, and also my opponent, Mar, for being here. So now I'm just going to jump into today's motion and kind of provide my arguments. So when you think about education, and particularly of teaching and learning in times of COVID-19, you cannot stop and wonder what impact it will have on higher and further education. An immediate impact, it has indeed been felt with the closure of university campuses around the world and the transition of teaching and learning to online environments, affecting millions of students and university staff. There's no doubt that this has happened. The immediate impact is enormous, and it disturbs established practices. However, claiming that these changes will have a long-lasting impact on teaching and learning is premature and unreflexive of the current strategies devised to overcome the challenges of social distance. I would go as far as to say that if nothing else, the evidence points in the opposite direction. As such, I propose that we should not confuse teaching and learning emergency measures currently in place and which rely heavily on digital solutions with a long-lasting effect on how teaching and learning will be organized in the future. There are many arguments in this regard, but I will try to focus on 3. First, transferring traditional teaching and learning practice to online environments does not constitute impact, at least not of a progressive and constructive kind. in the middle of the emergency ensured by COVID-19, institutions were forced to take their teaching and learning online. Without time to plan and reflect about the pedagogical consequences of such measures, emergency learning was performed as an act of translation of how things are done around here, rather than an act of localizing teaching and learning in a digital culture and practices that underpin the online world. This has resulted in practices focused on transfer of information rather than on reasoned debate that can encourage personal knowledge development. The obstacles are various here, not only access to reliable internet connection, but also appropriate technology. The types of technology that institutions have cherished and invested in for decades are arguably more geared towards organization of content and management of information than processes of knowledge development that would enable discursive and interactive input of students. And this is a problem. Although there has been investment in platforms for synchronous communication, these have been used to enable lecturing, not learning interaction. In this sense, it would be fair to say that teaching and learning during the pandemic has been done through translation of existing practices, when in fact, what could lead to critical change and impact would be the localization of teaching and learning practices in a new environment that has its own culture and norms of interaction and participation. And this takes me to the second point. So secondly, I argue that for meaningful change to take place, a crisis of meaning needs to ensue. As I pointed out previously, this has not happened yet. Teaching and learning in the current times of crisis continues to adhere to the same normative understanding of face-to-face teaching. Institutions, and I would even dare say also a majority of students and staff, continue to expect teaching and learning to be offered as a unilateral transaction. This is particularly so at undergraduate level. This has been made visible by the prime concern to get content online, thus neglecting the role of online context. Such expectations and mindsets do not allow for inspired changes, and if any impact will come out of this will be a negative one, in that online education will continue to be seen as a poor substitute and not as an innovative form of teaching and learning. This is also evident in how teaching and learning during the pandemic is still organized by traditional timetabling practices and standard learning slots. The change has been merely one of space, from physical to online. We cannot even claim a change of environment, as this would require an appreciation for cultural and communicative differences. And thirdly, this obsession with transferring teaching and learning online has put aside the preoccupation with providing students with an all-encompassing university experience that connects teaching and learning with a broader student life. This has been overlooked, mostly because institutions have, to a great extent, failed to create environments that compensate for the social aspects of campus life, and which are crucial to one's personal and intellectual growth as well as well-being. Most institutions have not been able to imagine teaching and learning beyond the lecture and seminar format. As such, if this experience is to yield any impact, it will more likely produce a negative perception of online education, in that university campuses will become the ultimate form of distinction, with teaching and learning done online seen as a poor option. This is not because online education does not have merit, it does, and I do support it, but rather because it has been done without much thought going into it. Although I appreciate the emergency of the actions taken, the fact is that thus far, a great majority of institutions has not managed to devise a set of more inspired strategies that show that teaching and learning in higher and further education is more than a set of recorded lectures made available online as a form of feeding information, rather than empowering knowledge and opinion formation as a process of discursive and interactive practices. Additionally, I would even be as bold as to say that many students and some of the staff seem not to be demanding a more innovative teaching and learning strategy to be put in place in these times. For these reasons, I then urge you to vote in favor of this proposition so that we can start addressing these issues in a more critical manner.
Well, thank you. Christina. That was passionately argued, and I must say, beautifully timed. Absolutely on the button in terms of timing. Let's just take a minute or two before we ask Dr. Perez San Agustin to begin, so that people can put some comments and questions up here. Okay, well, here we are. Okay, we get some good comments coming in now. Ma, may I invite you to give the case against the motion?
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, and good afternoon, everyone. I would like also thank you, Antonio and Alan, for inviting me to this event. It's my first Oxford debate, so let's see how it works. As Christina already said, and I know you are aware of that, we have observed that in this last period of COVID pandemic, all educational institutions from 166 countries closed their doors to traditional education and moved to different forms of remote learning. That means that more than 1 billion students were affected. This is an historical moment, in any case, for education. And for me, it is also a starting point for a paradigm shift from traditional education to new forms of technology-supported education. A change that, from my point of view, will transform forever education institutions as we know them today. Therefore, if you ask me if the COVID pandemic impact will last, yes, it will last. Explain you why the three main arguments supporting this statement. First of all, I think that the COVID crisis was also a period for learning. In fact, according to a UNESCO report, a recent UNESCO report, 60% of teachers were formed in digital methodologies and tools for remote learning during this pandemic period. In addition, billions of students were exposed to different ways of learning they were never exposed before, putting into practice valuable skills such as autonomy, self-regulation, that are not usually well developed in traditional education. That is, both teachers and students implemented and experienced alternative to this paradigm of face-to-face education. And this is, for me, ladies and gentlemen, has a big change for all of us. This has led to a change of mindset, that this cultural change that Christina was pointed out. I think we started making this cultural change, a change that for the first time in history, remote learning is offered not only as an alternative to moments of temporal crisis, but as an opportunity for a transformation that will remain. My second argument is that we have also better teachers, better formed teachers, and also better students. We also have better infrastructures for education. In fact, during this period of crisis, information technologies such as Zoom, Teams, as well as other technological infrastructures such as Moodle on educational institutions were exposed to an unprecedented situations. And this brought change for the better. On the one hand, we did a great investment in improving the tools available that were not always able to support all we need. And at this moment, we were able to support remote education at large scale. So we improved. On the other hand, we also learned how to generate new institutional processes able to cover the emergent needs from both students and teachers. And as a result, I would say that today we have institutions and companies with better services and processes able to face any challenge to come. And this leads to my third argument. We have nowadays a more resilient community. We have more resilient teachers, more resilient students, and more resilient institutions, better prepared for change. On the one hand, teachers are more prepared than ever and make more changes than ever. According to data from a consultancy called Talis, during the pandemic period, professional development of teachers have been more frequent and more intense than ever. In fact, 82% of the teachers state that they have already invested some of their knowledge they acquired in their current teaching practices. On the other hand, recent publications are proving that learners, they faced some difficulties, but they also had improved their learning skills. They improved their study strategies, making them more efficient in some cases and more effective learners. So in conclusion, I would say that the COVID crisis leaves us with a more prepared educational community. Teachers and learners more used to technology-enhanced practice, with better institutional infrastructures and with more capacity to react to the uncertainty. Of course, there are still many challenges to face. I agree with Christina. Urgent doesn't mean the good thing to go. But if history has shown us something, is that crises are also an opportunity for a change, because the crises are these peculiar moments in history in which we all come together as a society to solve a particular problem and turn it into an opportunity to innovate and transform the traditional education paradigm that has been imposed for a long time and move forward to new paradigms that we don't know already, but that could propose more sustainable ways for today's education. Therefore, I believe that the COVID pandemic impact will last in our universities and college. So I invite you to vote against this statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark. Thank you very much indeed. So we have, I think we can see the two traditions of these speakers. We have the strength of argument coming from the historical achievements of the Portuguese Navy up against the creativity, the French musical tradition. So very well balanced arguments, I think. And I can see in the chat that this is also the view of our participants, that they also think these arguments are well balanced, and people saying that taking both the perspectives, both for and against. So let me just see if I can pull some out. So one person, for example, Terry Anderson, thinks that experience is going to be the thing that counts. In other words, that the experience of online learning is going to support its sustainability in the future. Somebody else arguing that technology is going to have to include artificial intelligence in the future because teachers are not able to answer students' questions. Somebody else responding to the fact that crises do spark change, and that this has been a crisis which will spark change. And somebody else arguing that we need much more reflective action in order to improve teaching and learning that will impact on face-to-face learning. So that's an open conclusion, really. Will we have that reflection in the system? Another person arguing, Diana Andoni, arguing that for change to be embedded, there will have to be support and training if change is to take place. And Di Griffiths has made a comment also, just let me read it. So will students, parents, employers and funders change their ideas? And will traditional institutions change their ideas? He acknowledges that the COVID pandemic is the strongest challenge to established institutions and traditions. So Vanessa Cara says, good balance of arguments on both sides. Technology will definitely play a big part of the evolution of learning in the future, but how big a part, I guess, is the question that we're debating. And Lisa Marie Blaschke saying that, do we really know? Do we have any evidence about what is changing? What's our evidence base here? And what do we think should be the outcomes? Okay, so that is, I hope, a fair summary of the comments that have come up. Here we are. There's another comment from Menor Barrientos in Costa Rica. Not in Costa Rica, in, yeah, Costa Rica. Education does not happen in a vacuum. Right. So he's arguing that there are infrastructures, contracts, unions, traditions, social dynamics, and political interests, and they would drag us back to a traditional position and not all regions will go forward at the same pace. So there's a conclusion. So welcome to our colleagues from Central America. Yeah, somebody else saying there's no evidence for the future. We can only predict. Yeah, that's true. I think that's it. But this is central to our field of interest. So the outcome of this discussion is actually, although we're taking it in a reasonably light-hearted way, is actually a very important outcome. This is a big question. Okay, I think we're running out of comments. So somebody else hoping that things will change, hoping that teachers and students will persuade universities to make changes. Yeah. Right, I think I'm going to conclude the chat side of this. And Ma, may I ask you to have your 3 minutes or so to sum up, and you may respond to some of the arguments that Christina put and respond to some of the arguments brought up in the chat.
You're muted.
Your mic, please.
Sorry. Okay. I'm gonna start my phone also with the 3 minutes. Well, I agree that there are many challenges to face, and that urgency doesn't mean necessarily a good change for anything. I agree with that, and I agree with most of the arguments that Christina posed. However, I have to say, the pandemic crisis has questioned what we had, our current educational paradigm. And our current educational paradigm was not able to face the uncertainty of these times and the needs that were emerged in these times. And we had to face that, and we did. And we did that as a community, because crises are a new form of learning. Now we are, as a community, we know more, we have better infrastructure, and we are more resilient. And in fact, I think we did some changes in the way we teach and learn. Therefore, we have done something. However, in this change of paradigm, and like any paradigm shift, rules and methods have to be changed also, and tensions occur. And these tensions are the tensions that Christina were highlighting. It's true, we need more reflection. Transfers doesn't not make impact, but the rules we were using is not working anymore. We have to rethink, reimagine the rules in which we have been learning and teaching so far. We have to reimagine that maybe we have to spend some money in arriving to Costa Rica places where connectivity doesn't work. Maybe we have to change society for making this cultural change and make education from everyone, as Di Griffith was saying there. So yes, we need more reflection, but now we are in this moment in which we can refine and reimagine this future of education. Also, teaching and learning are just transferring, or we are losing the social experience that Christina was saying. Yes, we are missing this social experience, but we can reinvent this social experience. And if we are not having this social experience now, it's because of the crisis of the pandemic. We cannot relate to each other, but not because of the introduction of technology in education, and not because of the changes that we have been doing as educators. So we are already aware that we have these problems to lead, and we have still many problems that we will have to change as a community. But for me, it's the time to rethink these new rules and these methods for building this sustainable educational paradigm, addressing all these challenges and being conscious that these challenges as part of a new crisis that somehow have changed our mindset. And I think that having this experience is the key for the beginning of this transformation. For me, the current crisis has shown us that we are prepared as a community to face these great challenges. And now it's time to rebuild from these crises as a new educational paradigm that makes us a more resilient society. But also being conscious that we cannot do it alone. And we have to include in this process of change all the society in conversation with families and other societal actors that might impact and then make education the center of our society again. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mar. Thank you. So that concludes the case against the motion. Can I ask Christina now to give her summary for the motion?
Okay, I'll try to make sense of my my handwriting here, and I try to kind of at the same time answer to some of the arguments posed by Mar, as well as some of the comments coming through the chat. And I'll start by addressing Terry's comment on the experience counts, and I totally agree that the experience counts. But we also have to think that the majority of academic staff in colleges and universities does not teach online as their main form of activity. So experience in that sense is rather limited. And although training and personal development is key to that aspect, we have been doing that for a long time, but it has not been adhered as a main kind of aspect of people's stuff. So what I would say is that experience does count, and I don't want to really denigrate anyone's experience, but I think what we've been doing so far to a great majority, and the most universities especially are kind of arranged around a traditional form of teaching and learning, is that we've been doing what we can, or not what we could, in terms of kind of developing more inspired aspects of online learning, not just to impart knowledge, but actually to engage people in rather meaningful forms of knowledge processes. And that takes me to the kind of point that Mar talked about, infrastructure. I still think that the majority of our universities do take a top-down approach to technological infrastructure, where use systems that are far more related to being commanded by staff rather than by students. Students have very little power in terms of authorship of the tools that are available to them. And I would even argue that today in 2020, they have less opportunities to do so than in the early noughties, when there was far more opportunities through different companies offering these systems. And when these systems were taken over by multinational companies, these opportunities are no longer on the table. I would also have a note on resilience, which I think it's a very interesting point. But also along resilience, we haven't had as more burnout people and more a higher rate of burnout people and or decrease of well-being of staff and students than we have today. So that is an important aspect to take into account. Although I know the social distance has not helped in that regard. Again, I want to reiterate the point that these emergency measures have been put in place, especially to overcome the difficulties of teaching and learning, and have kind of overlooked the other needs of staff and students in terms of social connection. And that also relates to the fact that if we're going to go this way without thinking these things through in a more critical way, we're going to exclude the more vulnerable that come to university as a different opportunities, because the university is not supposed to be just a space to access knowledge, is a space to create a different type of life. So I think I kind of wrap up in trying to make sense of my own handwriting. So I hope I addressed some of the issues that were raised.
Thank you very much indeed, Christina. Thank you. Okay, so this now comes to the crunch point. Participants, we're going to vote for the second time now on the proposition that the COVID pandemic will have no lasting impact on learning and teaching in universities and colleges. And let's see whether the original vote is changed. So could we have the second vote, please, now?
It started, Alan.
Thank you very much.
So
Okay,
far,
anybody else to vote?
32 of the 38 participants who are
Okay,
entitled
so
to
a few
vote
more
have
votes,
voted.
please,
So
from
only 6 left.
if everybody is still there. Okay, well, I think we'll have to conclude that that is the vote. And I can say from the chair that voting for the proposition are 11 and voting against the proposition are 21. So congratulations to Ma for defeating the motion, but congratulations also for Christina, because you clearly persuaded more people during the debate than started up.
I did my best.
So
I give it a shot.
congratulations to you both, but more importantly, thank you very much to both of you for taking part in this and putting so much effort into it. I think it's been a very educative as well as an enjoyable process. Of course, in around 12 months, we'll have some evidence as to whether the COVID pandemic has made a lasting impact on our education systems, and what a great project it will be for EU funding to start collecting that evidence. Not for the UK, I hasten to add, because we won't be able to make proposals for research to the EU, because we've 51.7% of our population decided that they'd rather live in splendid isolation in the North Sea with our fish than to collaborate with our friends and neighbours in Europe. However, I think for our friends and neighbours in Europe, it would make a great project. And thank you also to Antonio, I think, whose brainchild this Oxford-style debate was, and to Maria and João for their support. And thanks once again to Christina and Ma for their very, very valuable and worthwhile and interesting arguments this afternoon. And I'm going to close this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Christina. You did well. Your statement was hard. Your position was harder.
Well, not hard enough apparently, but it's okay. Well done. I enjoyed this. This was actually really very fun.
Yeah, it was fun. I think I'm gonna prepare something like that also.
Okay,
Bye all.
Thank you so much for sharing, Alan. Bye.
Pleasure. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Antonio.
Okay, thank you, Mar,
everyone.
Christine, and Alan, of course.
Bye. Muy interesante, este estilo de debate. Tenemos que incorporarlo. Me ha encantado.
Ok, gracias.
Chao.
So I'm going to stop.
It's still streaming.
Yeah.